Zero Drift is a monthly leadership podcast from a U.S. Navy Command Master Chief with nearly 2 decades of leading teams. Practical tools tested under pressure for business, first responders, and the military. These are my personal views. They don't represent the Department of Defense or the Department of the Navy, any unit or organization. All scenarios are sanitized to protect people, operations, and methods. Welcome to Zero Drift. Welcome back to Zero Drift, the show where we explore how to stay on course in a world that's constantly shifting. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the science of leadership and what it takes to cultivate a top organizational culture. Modern workplaces are grappling with remote work, rapid innovation, and shifting employee expectations. How do exceptional leaders rise above this chaos? What does research say about the behaviors and cultures that drive performance? Stick around. By the end of this episode, you'll have evidence-backed strategies to lead your team to new heights. First, let's understand the science of leadership. Let's start with the basics. When we think of great leaders, we often think of charisma and natural talent. But research shows that good leaders are made, not born, and that they share a set of learnable qualities. The Center for Creative Leadership has spent decades studying leadership and identified 12 core characteristics that effective leaders cultivate: self-awareness, respect, compassion, vision, communication, learning agility, collaboration, influence, integrity, courage, gratitude, and resilience. Self-awareness helps leaders recognize their strength and their blind spots. Respect and compassion build trust and reduce turnover by showing employees that their voices matter. Vision and communication connect daily tasks to a larger purpose, keeping the workplace and people engaged. Importantly, these qualities are not one-time accomplishments. They require continuous practice. Learning agility, or the ability to adapt when you don't know what to do, is especially critical in a complex world. Integrity, courage, and gratitude create psychological safety, encouraging people to speak up and innovate. And resilience, that keeps leaders and teams moving forward when things go wrong. Research also shows that leadership character has a direct impact on business performance. A Harvard study summarizing Fred Keel's book Return on Character found that organizations led by CEOs with high character scores have an average return on assets 5 times higher than those led by low character CEOs. High character leaders aren't just ethical, they display compassion, a willingness to serve others, and forgiveness, qualities that enhance decision making and organizational trust. This underscores that leading well is not only the right thing to do, it delivers tangible results. Next, let's talk about psychological safety and how that affects high performing teams. One of the most compelling findings in organizational science is the importance of psychological safety, the shared belief that it's safe to speak up, make mistakes, and offer ideas without fear or punishment. Let me tell you about Google's Project Aristotle, which studied more than 180 teams across the company. Researchers initially assumed that team success would depend on talent, experience, and resources. Instead, they discovered that high-performing teams were those in which members felt safe to express their thoughts and ideas openly. That's psychological safety in practice. The project identified 5 key factors for an effective team: dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, impact, and psychological safety. But it was psychological safety that differentiated great teams from good ones. High performing teams also had equal conversational turn taking, meaning members were attuned to each other's emotions. These norms reduce barriers to speaking up and create an environment where innovation can thrive. Building psychological safety requires deliberate action from leaders. A 2025 report by Culture Amp notes that strong leaders build safety by communicating openly, fostering mutual respect and welcoming dissenting opinions. Employees who experience high psychological safety are more comfortable voicing contrary opinions and feel confident that their ideas are valued. The report advises managers to model behaviors like sharing their own learning moments, recognizing contributions, and carving out time for one on one conversations. Psychological safety isn't just a feel good concept, it has measurable impact. When employees feel safe, collaboration and problem solving improve, engagement rises, and teams innovate faster. Leaders who encourage transparent communication keep teams 7 percentage points more informed about company happenings, reducing uncertainty and building real trust with their teams. Next, let's talk about building high performance culture. So far, we've looked at individual leadership qualities and team dynamics. But how do these translate into top organizational culture? A culture is the shared values, norms, and behaviors that guide how work gets done. It's often said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and data supports it. A 2025 Forbes article reports that employees who feel connected to their organization's culture are 4 times more likely to be engaged at work and almost 6 times more likely to recommend their workplace to others. Yet only 30% of transformation efforts succeed, highlighting how hard cultural change can be. Trust me, when I first started leading almost 20 years ago, I thought manage was hard. And then I thought that leading other people was the next step. And now that I've been leading for almost 20 years, changing culture, that's the hardest thing that I've ever had to do as a leader. The same article outlines 5 strategies for successful culture change. First, leaders must conduct an honest assessment of existing culture, combining survey data with interviews to understand underlying norms. Second, organizations should embrace microcultures, recognizing that what works for one department may not work for another. Third, leaders must address burnout by building trust through transparency and fostering psychological safety. Fourth, align leadership and communication. Leaders who communicate a compelling vision are nearly 6 times more likely to succeed in cultural change efforts. Finally, leaders should measure what truly matters, tracking decision making processes, conflict resolution patterns, and idea flow to gauge cultural progress. These strategies complement the personal leadership traits we discussed earlier. By cultivating self awareness, respect, and integrity, leaders set the tone for a respectful culture. By promoting psychological safety, they encourage risk taking and innovation. By aligning vision and communication, they ensure that every employee understands how their work contributes to the organization's mission. All these elements collectively build a resilient and high performance culture, something we can all strive to have. Next, let's translate this research into practical steps that you can take and use tomorrow. 1. Start with yourself. Reflect on your leadership character. Ask, who am I becoming when I am busy doing? And do my decisions align with my organization's values? Embrace self awareness by seeking feedback and acknowledging your weaknesses. One of the best things that I ever did as a young leader is I would routinely ask my team, how are we doing? Are we going in the right direction? How am I doing as a leader? It's something I still ask when my employees check out. I say, hey, how am I doing as your command master chief? And how can I be better? 2. Build psychological safety. Encourage equal participation in meetings and be mindful of your responses to mistakes. Celebrate learning moments and model vulnerability. Use Google's Team Effectiveness Discussion Guide as a tool to assess and improve your team's norms. I'll put a link to it in the description. Third, communicate and align your organizational goals. Set meaningful goals that cascade from organizational objectives and revisit them regularly. Share the why behind decisions and show how every role contributes to the bigger picture. 4. Assess and evolve culture. Conduct regular culture audits using surveys or focus groups. Identify microcultures and tailor approaches while maintaining the core values of those teams. Measure progress using qualitative and quantitative data. Remember, culture is not a side project for human resources. It's a strategic priority that every leader must own. Strong leadership, character, and a psychologically safe environment create the foundation for high performance. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the science of leadership and organizational culture. We learned that good leaders aren't born. They develop a suite of qualities like self-awareness, compassion, integrity, and resilience. We saw that psychological safety is the secret sauce of high-performing teams as proven by Google's Project Aristotle. We discovered that building a top culture requires intentional action, from honest assessments to addressing burnout and aligning communication. If you're enjoying Zero Drift, please subscribe and share this podcast with a leader who wants to make a difference. I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. See you next time. This is Zero Drift.